Axel Tosca Laugard. I'm a piano player. I'm from Cuba, born and raised, and I'm just living in New York now, you know.
What part of Cuba?
I'm from Havana, Central Havana, for to be exactly.
Okay, okay. So, since you're from Cuba, and from your own perspective, like how has been your connection with just like Haitian music or Haitian artists or just Haitian people living in Cuba?
So, mi abuelo me crió mucho y influenció mucho para enseñarme lo que es la cultura haitiana. Mi last name, mi último nombre es Laugard. So, se pronuncia en Cuba Laugard, but in America, en Haiti, se pronuncia Laugard. So, creo que mi primera experiencia fue con la música changüí, del cual yo creo que es un derivado de algún tipo de roots o raíz de la música haitiana. So, mi abuelo todo el tiempo me inculcaba mucho este tipo de música que es muy ritmática y tiempos bien at meter. So, my real experience was in New York when I went to college, the Parson, the new school. I met Melanie Charles from Haiti, and she started to introduce me to the real culture. And I went for the first time to Haiti, and I saw, you know, las comparaciones, lo idéntico que
sí.
Las islas son, ¿no? Los sonidos, la gente. So, a partir de ese momento empecé a experimentar con la música haitiana. De hecho, la mayor parte del tiempo que toco en Nueva York es con haitianos. Emily Michelle, gente como Tabu Congo, he compartido con el mismo Wyclef, los productores de él. So, kind of like, yeah, para mí Haití es como Cuba al mismo tiempo, y sé que ellos admiran mucho la música cubana. Han estado following y intercambiando con nosotros. Bebo Valdés iba mucho a Haití y gente me han hablado sobre su experiencia de conocerlo, tocar para él. So, yeah, fue como reconectarme con mi segunda madre, patria.
So, why do you think it's important for Cuban and Haitians to relate with one another these days, but through the arts?
So, en Cuba, no te voy a decir que hay tanto orgullo de ser negro, porque no se habla sobre eso, no se habla sobre de dónde eres. Todo es un criollismo, que es criollo, España con África, todo junto. So, es bien difícil yo estoy tratando de inculcar eso en Cuba actualmente, porque no hablamos sobre de dónde somos, quién somos, de dónde son nuestros ancestros. Y parte de la Revolución Francesa influenció en Cuba, porque muchos de estos franceses o haitianos emigraron hacia Cuba, ¿no? So, creo que es muy importante para nosotros tratar de hacer un trabajo antropológico de quién somos, dónde somos, ¿no? Mi abuelo, da la casualidad, que siempre estuvo interesado en el árbol genealógico de nuestra familia. So, siempre me llevaba a casas y yo conocía familias con mi propio nombre, Laugard, de tez blanca, tez mulata, tez negra. So, sí, es muy importante para nosotros saber dónde somos, de dónde somos, nuestra cultura. Pero desafortunadamente ahora con el internet es muy difícil inculcar a la juventud. So, that's it, ¿no?
So how has Haitian music influenced the work that you do as a Cuban artist? Are there any like favorite songs? Is there any project ideas?
Yeah. Bueno, excited song. I know by memory, Me Si Bon Die. La he tocado 1000 veces. Me Si Bon Die es como la Guantanamera para Cuba, porque
sí.
todo el mundo, everybody played that song. So, yeah, es una música, es un estilo y es una cultura bien interesante, bien parecida, si ustedes le llaman voodoo, pero es bien parecida al Yoruba. So it's kind of like solamente por ese aspecto estamos completamente unidos. Y es como carnaval. I've been in Gaga, en Raga, en Rara. I've been in voodoo sessions. I've been playing compa with compa bands. I've been flying with compa bands. And I know Karimi. I know all the things that is happening right now. Yeah. I'm very in tune with Haiti. I still, actually, next week, I got a gig with Emily Michelle. So I'm all the time in tune with you guys. Like, I'm Cuba, Haiti. It's like,
That's it.
No.
Okay. Gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Hello.
I'm
From
Nathalie
any
Guillaume,
perspective.
and I'm actually a doctor of acupuncture and oriental medicine. That's my specialty. A lot of people in my family are actually both artists and physicians, so it's quite interesting because I went to conservatory, but I also, went to college. And my connection with the Haitian roots, I guess, starts way back from my mom's side because she always told me she remembers her great-grandmother being this older Cuban woman with long hair playing piano. So that was always her thing. And of course, we have the piano in the genes as well, and that's what I learned. That was my instrument. But she didn't really say much about her, but my mom was from Cap Haitien, and she always mentioned how, we have Mexican in our family, we have Guadeloupe in our family, we have Jamaicans in our family, it was just like the sambile, you kind of really understand the métissage, when you ask your parents where your parents from. Or if you just look at your parents' pictures, you see some white people in there, light-skinned people in there, black people in there, and then somewhere you're around there. And I think another connection, again, that we have with the Cuban is on my dad's side with the music, because a lot of musicians do come from my dad's side. Raul Guillaume is a famous composer, and that's my dad's uncle, so I grew up around that. Also, Guy Desrosiers, a famous singer, and that's my dad's uncle too. So it's kind of like we grew up in a big musical family, and my dad happens to be a musician too, and also a physician. My grandfather, same thing, played saxophone in Issa Zaye, also a physician. So it was kind of natural, I think, for me to like both science and arts. And on my dad's side, of course, because they love music so much, we always played music a lot in the house, and a lot of Cuban music was played. And that's where the history kind of came from, like, we used to travel to Cuba to record with Bebo Valdez, and, all these Cuban people used to come to Cabal Shukun, and we used to have these big parties, and they would show you these pictures, and they were hanging out with, like, Sidney Poitier, and, like, hanging out with, like, these top celebrities at the time, and you kind of learned about that Latino flavor only from Cuban heritage. You really wouldn't know anything about Boricua. You didn't know anything about Dominican, even if it was right there. You knew that if it was Latin, it was from Cuba.
Okay.
It was Chan Chan. It was the music that they like. It was the Besame Mucho. It was always the Cuban version. That's the version we knew. And we always felt connected in a way to Cubans, even though I never went to Cuba when I was young, even though they talked about it a lot. But later when I traveled there, I did find a lot of our roots there, and I did find a lot of people who did speak Creole. And it was kind of like a dialect for them. They never really were taught, it was just something they learned along the way. So interestingly enough, in my medicine work, when I meet people, they talk about Yoruba medicine a lot. They talk about Santeria a lot. So a lot of people are very curious. I think about, the spirituality of Cuba. I think in some way it's a little bit more gentle than Vodou, because people talk about these spirits a little bit more commonly than Haitian Vodou spirits. So me understanding both, I think that I'm always kind of dancing between what I call the Franco-Latino world, a little bit of French, a little bit of Latin. And when you think of Haiti, that's really what it is. They have a name for it. It's called Haitiando. They have albums for it.
Right.
People know about that.
Yeah.
So most Haitians actually tend to be a mix of that. And you can find, a connection somewhere. So that was my connection. It was through my mom's great-grandmother's side, and then my father's musical side, and, their interest in traveling and recording there.
So obviously our connection between Cuba and Haiti is definitely Africa and our roots.
Definitely.
As an artist, how has either or both your Cuban and Haitian side influenced your work?
Wow. I think it's, again, like a connection with the Franco-Latino idea that I'm speaking of. I think when you meet Haitian musicians, one thing that makes them different is that francophone, the francophonie, the francophonie. And the francophonie connects us to all the other countries that speak French. That means that connects you to the African world that speak French. It connects you to the Caribbean world that speak French. The big islands, the small islands, So the francophonie is actually a big asset, for Haitians, and that brings about the conversation about the Haitian songbook, right? Because even though we're francophone, our music, thanks to Oswald Durand and thanks to many great literary people in the Negritude era of the 30s, has been mostly in Creole. So I wrote a little book, actually, which is really funny.
Nice.
This is called Chanson d'Haïti by Raoul Guillaume, my grand-uncle. And I went to a library in Haiti because I love papeteries and I love, paper goods and stuff. And I always like to see the newest stuff the kids are reading in Haiti and what's going on. They're reading the same stuff. It ain't changed, trust me. It's the same books, trust me, it ain't changed. And so I like to do that. And recently when I went, I found Chanson d'Haïti, Songs of Haiti, Volume 5, Raoul Guillaume, and it had all these songs, which is obviously a lot in Creole. So these are songs that have been translated in multiple languages around the world. These are songs that multiple people have played, from Switzerland to Japan to whatever. And so I like to talk about like the Haitian songbook. I think that that's a heritage that I have, that most Haitians who have Haitian musician in their family have. It's a real songbook. I mean, it's facts. It's charts, it's words, it's a folk tale. It has a spirit connected to it. And if you do your research, you'll find a big band that probably played it somewhere. But if you ask Haitian kids about the Haitian songbook, they probably will give you like a compas song, a kangimi song, or something new. Because we have no idea about our own. And that's the same thing, I think, with the Cuban heritage. It's like, if you meet any Cubans, you go to their gigs, there's like these standards that they play, right? So that would be like their songbook. So I think it's something that as an artist I always thought of in the back of my head, like when I compose, composing like contre-tempo, contre-dance, kind of very very syncope, kind of orientation. And I think also when you play some of those drums, they change your palette, they change your ideas, they change the way you play, they change your rhythm, And the latest song that my grand-uncle had written, it was really interesting. And this was literally when he was in the hospital, and he was still composing in the hospital. He did not care. He was still writing. He's 96 years old, very alert. And this is called La Petite Contredanse. And if you know Cuban music, Contredanza is a style of Cuba.
That's right.
So we share the same style. If you listen to merengue carnavalesque, which is merengue of carnival that used to be before the 70s, it sounds like merengue, So I think my love for rhythm, my love for that sabor, that flavor, that I'm looking for, it's pretty much coming from, I think, the Cuban heritage, the Latino heritage. Because again, Latino for us means Cuban. That's just facts when you're in Haiti, right? When you think Latino, that's what you think. And of course, there's that nostalgic, melancholic francophone energy. Because, when you listen to Edith Piaf, or if you listen to any of those French songs, they're very sad. They're very and people from, again, the literary world in Haiti, that's a style of writing. It would be a style of writing that, because so many Haitian people were going away for school, for university, most of our famous Haitian figures have gone to school abroad, like a lot of people, as you know, in the small islands. And this is where the style of nostalgie, started. It would just be like them writing about how much they miss Haiti, them writing about how much they miss their land. And it would just be like, like my grand-uncle, it sounds like what you grew up with. It's like, we look at this album, like it has a song here, Quoi mon fiston. And it says basically in French, believe me, my son. And he wrote it for his mom saying, if things don't work out, I'm going to come back home. I miss home. It doesn't matter how famous you are, if you're doing music with Edith Piaf, if you're hanging out with whoever, but that style of nostalgic music comes from our French heritage. We're really nostalgic like that, And so Haitians, when they go abroad, it's like all they do is write about Haitianness, and that became a style. So I think music-wise, I connect with that very open, style of a nocturne, because that is actually a style of music in classical music. It's more nocturnal, nocturne. I love nocturnes, and I love the Latino kind of the flavor of the contradance, which is kind of like very easy to dance, but also very soft. And, kind of reminds me a little bit of Brazilian a little bit too, but, that's another conversation, right?
Yeah,
we got to do another conversation about that.
So
but,
who would you say is
definitely.
your, I guess, your favorite artist that's sort of bridging all of these worlds right now, outside of yourself?
Oh my God, I would not be able to even talk about anyone musically if I did not say the name of Toto Vicente, because for me Toto Vicente represents that.
Yes.
Because Toto Vicente was also an actress, she lived in Paris and she lived that francophone life, and when you listen to her music, it's extremely avant-garde, it's extremely experimental, it's very open, it's very theatrical. And again, I think that's what we have, as Haitians, we're very extra, you go, hey, it's like so extra.
Yes.
But it's the folklore, it is the dance, it is our way of expressing ourselves. And if we do music and we don't add that to it, it kind of doesn't feel like Haitian music anymore, And so when I listen to Toto Vicente, I really like the way that she used these experimental kind of jazzy sounds, but also very rustic, approach. And also a theatrical performance, which I think we're really losing, in Haitian music, because we're so focused on the compa and the dancing and that kind of carnival. Even, again, the carnival now is not merengue carnavales because you cannot dance it. Mm-hmm. So it's more like chauffer, musique, chauffer, chauffer, tissouit, But at the end, again, that's only one side of Haitianness. So the other side is that experimental, avant-garde, Franco-Latino, nocturnal side, and plenty of people don't even know where to find that.
We've been doing this.
It's just like, I think that people hear it and they think it's new, and I'm like, no, this is like 78, and it's like, I really think that that's my inspiration, because I love that sound. And even though sometimes people hear my music like, well, this is, I don't know where to put this at, I don't know. Like, I don't know. But you know what? I'm a healer. And for me, I feel like there's a place in your energy center where I can connect to with this music. Mm-hmm. And that's my interest. My interest is connect to that. It's not just to connect to only the dancing or only the jazz, but really also maybe a part of you that may be missing Haiti. That part, that's the part I feel like.
And all parts of you, especially with the influence of Cuba as well.
Oh yeah, the influence of Cuba. There's because as you know, the Cubans have had to leave and they couldn't come back. I mean, how nostalgic are they? Like, they are the epitome of nostalgia. I mean, if you know any Cubans, all they do is talk about Cuba all day. They don't even speak English, so they definitely talk about Cuba all day. It's like I always used to teach them, like, okay, para español mal que dos, you don't need to speak, French. Here we speak French. It's really rare to find people who speak French or Creole, but Cubans, they can just fall in the Latino group, which means, like, again, para español mal que dos. So it's like a lot of Cubans are here and also very nostalgic, and they're missing home. And I think that's something we have in common. There's a lot of experimental, musicians too. As you know, Cubans are very famous in the jazz world, which is an experimental sound of music, You're walking down in Havana, and it's like everywhere you hear people playing a violin, people playing a trumpet. It's just part of their culture. Everyone's playing a piano. You go to the Institute of Art at the East Side. It's like a palace, literally a palace with the entrance with the palm trees and the waterfall, and you're like, this is a music school? Okay. Don't take this really seriously, because that's part of what they have too. That's all they have, so when they travel with it, because most Cubans do travel with their music and don't go back. So it is because they're trying to escape that same way the Haitians are escaping, by boat or whatever. And at the end of the day, no matter where they are in the world, they still miss Cuba. So that's something we have in common, is it's nostalgic. We're nostalgic people, but we kind of dance it out. That's how we deal with it. We're like, okay, we'll have a party about this. But when you listen to the music and you hear the way that it's danced and you hear the emotions and you feel, that vibe, you're like, wow, that person really is authentic, and they don't lose authenticity. Haitians don't lose authenticity. We don't just say, I want to sound African American or I want to sound Jamaican. I mean, you're probably not going to do that for too long. It'll probably be a phase, because you will come back, to your Haitianness or your Cubanness, because it is who you are. When you hear that drum beat again, you will remember who you are, and that's what we have in common is the tambor, is the dancing. So we miss that. Wherever we go, we miss that. That's for sure. I think nostalgia is connected to Cuban music and Haitian music for sure.
Thank you.
My name is Okai Music, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I get that's Okai is my artist name. I I chose that name because that's where my parents are from. So I just wanted to bring awareness to that part of Haiti called Okai. And I am a percussionist. Been a percussionist since I can remember. I guess since I've been like 5-6 years old, I've been playing percussion. And I'm a student of the rhythms of the African diaspora.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you recently went to Cuba.
I did.
What part of Cuba, and what was the inspiration for that trip?
Well, I went with the Afro-Puerto Rican Bomba group. There's a festival in Santiago called Festival de Fuego, I believe. And every year they celebrate a different Caribbean country. This year was Puerto Rico. So I've been drumming with this group named Bombazo for about 10 years as a percussionist. So the group got invited to go to Santiago for the festival. So I had the pleasure of going to Santiago for the second time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was there, I was introduced and met a lot of Haitians in Santiago.
Yeah, so you are a drummer and you have the rhythms of various places, African and Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting as a person who's of Haitian descent, going with the mainly Puerto Rican band or group, and then going to Cuba and finding their own rhythms and practices there, and then meeting other Haitians. So tell me about that experience and how are the rhythms, in sync, or how did you all produce music or just vibe?
So it was more of like a showcase for different groups that were representing Puerto Rico. But while I was there, I met a lot of Haitian groups, and it was funny because I don't speak too much Spanish, but being that I speak some Creole, it was interesting that I was I was like the middleman between the Puerto Rican group and the Haitian groups, and when they found out that I was Haitian playing with the bomba with the Puerto Rican groups, they were it was just bringing both cultures together. A Haitian group based in Santiago, and a Puerto Rican group based in New York representing Puerto Rico, and all of that coming together. It was just amazing to be in the middle of that, to soak up the culture of the Caribbean.
Yeah. Why do you think it's important, especially for contemporary artists like yourself, to connect to those African roots or Caribbean roots?
It's important because the more you learn the history of West Africa, Haiti, Puerto Rico, Cuba, it's just we are at the end of the day we're all the same. We came from the same boat. We just got dropped off in different places, but a lot of the rhythms are similar, gestures, demeanors, like mannerisms. You know what I mean? Like the way. Although different languages, but still the gestures of when we talk, you know what I mean? Everything, there's art in everything we do. And it's just beautiful to see that all come together. As a percussionist, as a child of studying all these rhythms, you just see the similarities between bomba, rumba, and gaga, of course. It's just all the same thing, you know what I mean? But of course, there's slight differences. But at the end of the day, that 3/2, it marries everything together. It is like the most popular rhythm in the African diaspora. And Tubadu in Haiti, of course, you hear the clave 3/2. And a lot of course, many different styles of Cuban music, you hear the 3/2. In West African music, you hear the 3/2. In Cuban music and Afro-Puerto Rican music, you hear the 3/2. It's just all over.
Could we get a little sample of a 3/2?
Of a 3/2?
Yeah.
I mean, we all know it. It's just in us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, people don't even know how popular it is. You know what I mean? It's just.
Yeah. So
people do it a little faster. Some people do it a little slower, but it's all the same thing.
So, with your experience, being Haitian in the States of New York, traveling Haiti and to Cuba, what do you think, how can you project the future in terms of this music, in terms of us merging cultures?
I see a new genre starting, where it's going to be influenced by the different rhythms from people of the African diaspora, because I know many people who are studying the similarities between Afro-Brazilian, Cuban, Haitian. It's just eventually it's just going to be everyone just coming together and coming up with a new genre that is influenced by all this different type of sounds. And of course, Haitians have to be involved. You know what I mean? Because Haitian and Cuban music, I mean, the rhythms are probably the most complex that I've seen thus far. Because a lot of other rhythms, different countries, most of the drummers, they're syncopated. They're doing the same thing, and you have one person, doing a solo or something like that. But Haitian rhythms, it's very polyrhythmic, where it's the mama drum and the segon are conversating. And of course, when someone is conversating, when one person is talking, you don't want to talk over the person. So everyone has their space of going back and forth. And rumba is Cuban music is the same thing. Now, you have the soloist and you have two drums conversating with each other, not trying to play at the same place. Afro-Puerto Rican drums, all the drums are doing the same thing. And you have one soloist following the dancer. So that's why I find Haitian and Cuban drumming so interesting, because it's a little bit, you have to study a little bit more, because the language is a bit more complex and difficult, and that's why that's the similarities I see between the Haitian and the Cuban rhythms. Yeah.
Great. So it seems like you felt at home.
Oh, it was
right?
Straight home.
And we have our saying, Lakay c'est Lakay.
Lakay c'est Lakay.
So when you met other Haitians or just fellow Cuban artists, what was it in terms of that home feeling?
I mean, at some point when I was speaking to the Haitian elders in Santiago, I felt like I was in Haiti for a minute. It just, I forgot where I was. I was like, oh shoot, this is like Haiti in Cuba, or it's like it was just an amazing feeling to be speaking to Haitians in Santiago, because I couldn't speak Spanish to them because I wasn't good at Spanish, but I just started speaking Creole, so it was just, I don't know, it was just a really good feeling just to speak Creole with fellow Haitians in Cuba. You know what I mean? And of course, the elders, they were making sure that their kids would learn Creole as well. And I was bumping into other people who weren't even Haitian who spoke Creole. They were like, oh, I grew up around Haitians, so I speak Creole. You know what I mean? And of course, I didn't speak Spanish. He didn't speak English. So we were going back and forth in Creole. It was just an amazing feeling to be able to use my my parents' native tongue on another island.
Okay, great. Thank you.
My name is Joyce Alvarez, Coroniaux in Spanish. I'm from Cuba. I'm born in Cuba. Actually, I'm born in El Oriente de Cuba, in Guantanamo, very, very near for Haiti. So I have half, for my mother's side, African Haiti roots, and for my father, Spanish. So an interesting mix. So everybody know me as B. Joyce in Cuba. I'm DJ, producer. Now I'm live right here in New York, but I'm between New York and Havana. A little time here, a little time there, because the weather is maybe crazy sometimes. Yeah, but I think that it's interesting for me, this study, because for my mother's side, I got all this influence about the African culture the 80. Actually, nací en Guantánamo, in the end of Cuba, the ass of Cuba. Pero me mudé a La Habana, at the capital, Habana, con 3 meses. So, realmente nunca viví. I never lived in Guantánamo. So, all my life was in Havana. But, you know, la cultura, las raíces, la sangre, the blood is strong, is, you know, y está en mí. Toda esa relación entre Haiti, Cuba, es bien fuerte. It's very strong. And you can feel it. Yeah. So, what more you want to know?
So, talk about just like your experience with Haitians living in Cuba. I mean, it's your culture, it's part of who you are. You know, how has it influenced, if at all, like your music or work that you want to do in the future? But just like, what's the life of like Haitians in Cuba, and how have you related?
So, something interesting.
Yeah.
En Cuba, there is like a dicho que dice, quien no tiene de Congo, tiene de Carabalí. And it's like you have this size and the other size, or both together. So, everybody in Cuba, in a way, have this, you know, mood, this feeling about the sabrosura, you know, the rhythm, about the music, yo siempre digo, dale 2 palos y una lata a cualquiera and you can make music. Because, you know, está en la sangre, está en nosotros. So, yo no soy músico de nacimiento, es decir, no estudié música, I'm not studying music, pero la influencia que tengo por mi madre y mi padre, pues me llevaron de cierta manera a acercarme a this way to make DJ, because it's the way that I, you know, was interesting for me. Like, I can learn about this sound, this, I can combine this, take this, or I can get this at the end, so you can do your own stuff. Y indiscutiblemente las raíces cubanas están en mí all the time, en mis DJ production, in my own music, in my DJ session too, because I love the percussion, la percusión, you know, la rumba, I'm sorry, el tambor, you know, es como que me mueve, te mueve. So,
talk to us about Kombancha and that idea.
Yeah,
and
so
I know it's from the African roots,
yeah,
right?
So Kombancha, in fact, the meaning of Kombancha is an African word, and mean party, an improvisación, una fiesta improvisada donde everybody come together and do a party, friends, family, everybody together. So for that reason was the idea to the name Kombancha, you know, and you heard the word is like a Kombancha, like sound like something there.
Yeah.
And in the beginning was like a, you know, with Okai, with you, with all of us made this party with percussion, with las conexiones, las raíces africanas, latina, no solo africana, latina, española, todas las conexiones, because, you know, nos alimentamos todos de todas las raíces. Y en Cuba, por ejemplo, tenemos las influencias de Haití, de África, de España. So it's a very, very, very hard mix between the culture. Y de ahí es que nace también de la tumba francesa, que es de donde sale en Santiago, en el oriente, toda la música cubana criolla, el changüí, el cha-cha-cha, todo junto. So, por eso yo siempre digo que todo el mundo dice de que Puerto Rico y Cuba son un pájaro de la misma ala. Y yo digo que Haití y Cuba son dos espuelas del mismo gallo. So that is something that, you know, is hard, and it's strong. Yo nunca en toda mi vida he vivido en el oriente del país, en Cuba. En Guantánamo nací, pero nunca he vivido. Pero he ido, he estado, conozco la ciudad, conozco la gente, la fuerza que hay cultural. Me gustaría muchísimo, muchísimo poder aprender mucho más de la cultura haitiana, because I know from my mom's side a little, you know, todas las historias, all the story about when she was a young child with her mom, que la curaba con medicinas verdes, que, you know, all that kind of stuff, but I never be like a inside to know, but
yeah, but the rhythm,
yeah,
the
the rhythm, the music,
your connection,
yeah,
to
the
your
connection
roots.
is there, it's alive all the time. In Cuba, it's like a, you know that, you know, you be there and
Yeah,
you feel it all the time.
Havana.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yes.
and everybody have this feeling like a Axel. You saw him. You saw him. In Cuba, everybody have inside this like the Haitian people, like the African. You know, you can hear like this what the sound of the tambor or the sound of every instrument, whatever instrument, and will be like hey, wait, let me see, wait, because it's in the blood.
So the root is Africa.
The root is Africa,
right?
yeah.
We're talking about Cuba and Haiti, but we know the root is Africa. Why do you think it's important for us as Cubans, as Haitians, one, to preserve this culture, but where do you see the future of it, especially in electronic music? Why do you think it's important for us to relate?
So right now, I see like for talking about Cuba. Right now, in Cuba right now, hay un movimiento, like a movement, very hard to defend and mantener vivo todas las raíces cubanas. You know, all these roots about the culture to make it more contemporary. Because, you know, generation by generation, the people lost a lot of things. And the young people, they don't know, you know, like me, like this generation, they don't know a lot of things before que mis padres vivieron, a lot of sound, you know. And in my view, in my vision, right now, muchos músicos, muchos DJ, productores están tratando de, you know, mantener ese sonido, es decir, captar y alimentarse de esas sonoridades y hacer nueva música contemporánea, but with, you know, with that sound, with the percussion, with the tambor, with the I don't know, it's, you know, it's that, yeah.
Yes.
Y yo lo veo, for me it's interesting and I love it because you always need to defend your roots and, you know, to know who you are and defend whatever you were, who you are, like me. I'm always say that I'm cubana de pura cepa, cubana, so cubana from Cuba, not cubana from Miami. Yeah, because everybody asks me, oh, you're Cuban? Yeah, but no, Cuban from Miami, Cuban from Cuba. Yeah, so it's interesting right now in Cuba, el trabajo que están haciendo muchos músicos, like Axel, he's young, and he have a very, very strong family in the music, in musician. And él trata de defender, you know, all that roots e inculcárselo a los músicos allá too, because they don't know a lot too. And when we are out to Cuba, you can see more, and you have more. You can touch more the knowledge. You are more near, you know.
So it seems like, you know, our generation or this generation of like Cuban or Haitian artists who are innovative, who are thinking outside the box but still connecting to their African roots or their Cuban or Haitian roots, that we're sort of like the keepers of the culture, right? And we're the future.
Yeah. So I already told you, last year they start this celebration in Cuba. And was 1 week between was 265 years between the transculturation Haiti Cuba, and that is so important because a lot of people don't know that. And in Cuba, it's a little complicated. All this when you speak about, you know, about your root. I don't know why. I think that maybe it's the same people or the parents that don't let for example, I need to teach to my daughter where she come, you know, because she need to know her way. And a lot of people don't do that. They forget everything. It's like, okay, I don't interested about that. I wanna learn about this, know this, but you need to know who you are. Yeah.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi, my name is Reijin Gomez. I'm an artist, educator, and visual anthropologist. And my connection to Cuba started a long, long time ago. It started when I was a child. My dad is a musician, and he played all types of music. He was a part of a band in Ayiti called Ibo Combo, which was an early compa band. And so I grew up listening to, of course, compa, but, you know, samba, merengue, just everything. And so my first, actually for my sisters and I, we all grew up listening to music, and often we didn't understand the language. We didn't fluently speak Spanish. We weren't speaking Portuguese for the music from Brazil, or when we were listening to music from South Africa with Miriam Makeba, we didn't, you know, speak those languages. So that's how Cuba entered my own consciousness as a child. And one of the things that I also remember was we used to watch reruns of I Love Lucy. And so in watching those reruns, you know, you're getting a bit of American history and you're getting all this stuff, right? But I remember that there was this episode of Lucy's husband, Ricky Ricardo, which was Desi Arnaz, right? And he did an episode where he was a band leader. I mean, everybody knew that's what he was. But then he did this episode and he did a song to Babalu Aye. And I found that to be very, very significant that he would decide, right, you know, as a Cuban, to play that song. And in essence, it's a call to their African ancestry, African roots, the Yoruba culture. And Babalu Aye is a Yoruba deity within the tradition. And so as a child, it was there. I can't say that it was like, oh, that's what you know. But seeing the reruns and then seeing the reruns again and then seeing that, and I was like, yeah, I remember that. I remember. And also, there's a part where at the end, he plays a particular rhythm, which hails where he's from, because he was from Santiago de Cuba, Desi Arnaz, right? And so there's a way in which he played the drums where it was kind of like at the end where he just kind of did like a drum solo. So that also stood out. And then I started moving into photography and filmmaking as I got older. And I was introduced to the work of Nestor Hernandez. And Nestor Hernandez was an American of Cuban heritage. And I saw his work at an exhibit in Washington, D.C. And though I didn't know him, I felt like I felt like this was my husband, like this is it, like, this is the man, because his imagery was so magical. The way that I saw Cuba through his lens, through his eyes, really helped to push me into the work of working as a documentary photographer. And so that's my introduction. My first trip to Cuba was in 2000, and I went with my daughter. She was about 6-7 years old, and we went to Haiti and Cuba.
Nice.
And we flew directly from Ayiti, and we got on one of those small little planes. I was like, jamais. I was like, what? Y'all playing out here. But anyway, so we got on one of those small little planes and flew, into Havana.
Wow.
Now, before I went, I made lots of connections, different people, and so I had numbers for Casa Particulares. But our intention was just to go directly to a hotel. And so though I had been told so much about racial issues in Havana, I also had this romanticized view that I wouldn't experience any type of racial division. But very early on, we did. As soon as we entered the hotel, it was unfortunate in the sense of not being treated well, not being served, not really wanting to, the patrons wanting us to stay in that hotel.
Because you wasn't white or white.
Because we weren't white. And that was the beginning, but that wasn't at all the end, So if I just had left Cuba and just said, this is messed up, then I could have not really seen all of it.
Right.
And actually, that was my first of 3 trips. And there is a beauty and a magic in Cuba that I think that nowhere else in the world quite has it. And part of that is, even though I'm sure there were many political divides under Castro, but under Castro, there was a sensibility where people were more of themselves and not pushed to be something else that the West could create. Not to say that within the structure there was not already a divide in the sense of, the Spaniards who had been there, and so the whites who were in privilege, and then the rebellion, right? The revolution, and what was supposed to happen. There are positives, whether or not you agree with Castro or not. What other place around the world has 99% literacy rate? Haiti doesn't have that. The first liberated nation in the West, black liberated nation, 1804, as Haitians were very proud to say that. But where are we today? What's happening? And so every time I went to Cuba, I saw the intention of the manifestation of greatness in the sense of the actuality. People can read and write, and they can make decisions. Yes, you can say that it was under a dictatorship, but dictatorships happen all over the world. Democracy is overrated. It's overrated because we think we live in a democracy here in the United States, and we do not. If we actually did, maybe it wouldn't be overrated. Maybe it's not that it's overrated, it hasn't been actualized in this country, and we think that it has. And one of the things that I experienced when I was in Cuba is that I was able to see many people, at their core being themselves. Many were not happy in the sense of their conditions regarding money. Many had to have multiple hustles. It hurt me to see young girls with old Europeans, and the family also knowing that that's what they're doing, but the family surviving off of that. But also, I also had to come to terms that people make a living and survive in many ways all over the world. And so I shouldn't come in any particular type of judgment because I've never been in those circumstances. And for me to be able to go as an artist and connect and to see people flourishing, in their, in a particular way that I call like a God consciousness, a God consciousness, awareness of self. When you see Cubans sing, dance, whether or not they acknowledge their African roots or not, it's all in there. It comes out just in the sense, in the way the children move. You can look at a little boy, blue-eyed, blonde, and once the drums start, his whole body starts to move, and he understands the connection with spirit. And so there's a respect that I appreciate. So like every place, there are issues. There's places for growth, right? And so Cuba just was one of those countries that always stayed with me. It never left me. It's always been, so it's been 3 years. And the first time I went with my daughter, and then the second time my work was included in an exhibition curated by Nestor Hernandez. I actually got to know him.
Your husband.
Right. So, Nestor is an ancestor now. And he did his work. A big part of his work was connecting African American photographers to Cuba. And so he actually facilitated tours, and actually not just photographers, artists. And so he was based in Washington, D.C., which is where I'm from. And so I was able to go and spend time. And it was just beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. The connection between Haiti and Cuba is one that some historians say really became solidified after the Haitian Revolution with French slave owners rushing to Cuba for refuge from Haiti. Basically, they got their ass kicked. They didn't have no place to go.
Right.
And so they went with enslaved Africans. They went with enslaved Haitians, and they ran to Cuba. So that's one aspect of how Haitians were, some brought against their will. And then, of course, when we look at the political conditions in Haiti, and we see that there have been multiple times where Haitians have left the country for refuge, for political refuge, Cuba has always been one of those places. And we, of course, we know historically Guantanamo Bay has been a place where many Haitians went because they weren't able to get really refuge in the United States. And the United States actually held them there in jail-like conditions. One of the things that I think that's really powerful about Cuba is the retention of a culture, of a spiritual culture, where under over 50 years of Fidel Castro, where there was supposed to be no religion, right? And so it's interesting in looking at the survival of traditional West African spiritual practices across the world, whether it's Christian-based, Muslim-based, or agnostic or atheist. The Yoruba culture continues, Lukumi, if we know it's very strong there. And so in going and being able to go and meet those that are still practicing, being able to go and get readings, being able to go to a Rumba and look at the way that the body moves, and then having just lived in Benin for 2 years and looking at the retention of culture that is over 400 years old. So a little child that's 5 years old can move their body to the drum the same way that the child that is born on the continent does, because it is within our soul, it is within our spirit. And so Cuba is mi amor, Cuba is a lover that, there's always space for him on my bed.
Okay.